Fire and Blood by George R. R. Martin. Long before the political games that would come to define Westeros, the continent was a fractured land of petty, warring kingdoms. Enter Aegon Targaryen, an enigmatic and visionary warrior who commanded the skies atop the Black Dread, Balerion. Alongside him flew his sister wives. Visenya, a stern, austere warrior who wielded the Valyrian blade, Dark Sister, and dabbled in dark arts with equal ease, and Rhaenys, a playful, impulsive queen who adored music and flight. Together, they launched a relentless campaign to unify the continent into a single realm. The conquest was a spectacle of overwhelming draconic power. Castle Harrenhal, believed impenetrable, was melted into a twisted, glowing ruin, extinguishing the ruling Ironborn line in a single night. On the field of fire, the combined armies of the Reach and the Westerlands were decimated in a terrifying inferno, whilst the North surrendered without a fight when their king knelt before the dragons. In the Stormlands, Aegon's fierce champion, Orys Baratheon, slew the last Storm King and claimed his domain. Only the desert realm of Dorne successfully resisted, utilizing harsh terrain and guerrilla tactics that ultimately claimed the life of the beloved Queen Rhaenys at Hellholt. Eventually, a mysterious, heartfelt letter from the Dornish leadership convinced Aegon to accept their independence, bringing a fragile but lasting peace to the newly forged Iron Throne. Following Aegon the Conqueror's death, his sons plunged the young dynasty into utter chaos. First came Aenys, a well-meaning but frail and indecisive ruler who desperately sought the love of his subjects. His perceived weakness invited massive rebellion, most notably from the militant arm of the faith, who abhorred the Targaryen practice of incestuous marriage. When Aenys succumbed to illness and stress, the throne was seized by his half-brother, Maegor the Cruel. Massive, fearsome, and utterly ruthless, Maegor answered the faith's defiance with unparalleled brutality, burning holy septs and slaughtering the warrior orders. He commanded the completion of the Red Keep in King's Landing, only to ruthlessly murder every builder and mason involved to protect the secrets of its hidden passages. Despite taking numerous wives, including several so-called Black Brides, in a desperate, violent bid for an heir, Maegor produced only stillborn monstrosities, a curse many attributed to dark magic, poisons administered by his exotic mistress Tiana, or divine punishment. As the entire realm united against his bloody tyranny, Maegor was found mysteriously dead, impaled upon the jagged blades of the Iron Throne itself. The realm's salvation arrived with Aenys' surviving son, Jaehaerys the Conciliator. Handsome, wise, and highly charismatic, Jaehaerys ushered in a golden age of peace and prosperity, spanning over half a century. Aided by the brilliant, low-born Septon Bath as his hand, the king transformed the legal and physical landscape of the realm. He was matched in every endeavor by his sister wife, Good Queen Alysanne, a slight, bright-eyed woman possessing immense intellect and deep compassion for the common folk. Together, they built a vast network of roads connecting the disparate kingdoms, abolished the barbaric lord's right of the first night to protect common women, and established the doctrine of exceptionalism to peacefully reconcile Targaryen customs with the faith. Yet, their massive public triumphs masked deep, private sorrows. They endured the tragic deaths of many of their 13 children, who succumbed to winter illnesses, childbirth complications, and horrific accidents. The most painful betrayal came from their tempestuous daughter Sarah, whose scandalous, rebellious exploits drove a bitter wedge between the king and queen. Ultimately, having outlived his beloved wife and his two most capable heirs, the old king was forced to convene a massive great council to determine the succession, establishing an iron precedent that male claimants should always bypass females. The crown passed to Viserys first, an amiable, plump, and conflict-averse monarch who inherited a peaceful and prosperous realm. Defying the recent precedent, Viserys boldly named his eldest child, Princess Rhaenyra, as his sole heir. Rhaenyra was a beautiful, proud girl, celebrated widely as the realm's delight. However, the king's subsequent marriage to the clever, graceful, and ambitious Alicent Hightower sowed the toxic seeds of disaster. Queen Alicent provided the king with healthy sons, notably the sullen and self-indulgent Aegon the Elder, and the fierce, hot-tempered Aemond, who would later lose an eye in a vicious childhood brawl with Rhaenyra's children and replace it with a glittering sapphire. The court quickly fractured into two rival factions, the Greens supporting Queen Alicent's sons, and the Blacks fiercely defending Rhaenyra's claim. Rhaenyra's position was heavily complicated by rumours that her three dark-haired sons by her first husband, Lenor Velaryon, were actually bastards sired by a burly household knight. Adding fuel to the fire, Rhaenyra eventually took her dashing, dangerous, and wildly unpredictable uncle, Prince Daemon, as her second husband. Daemon had previously waged a bloody, independent war in the Stepstones alongside the incredibly wealthy mariner Corlys Velaryon, known as the Sea Snake, who had built a massive fortune upon 9 legendary sea voyages. King Viserys spent his final years deteriorating from a rotting illness, desperately maintaining a facade of family unity through the secretive manipulations of his master of whisperers, Larys Strong the Clubfoot. This fragile peace dissolved the very moment the king drew his last breath. The king's passing ignited the devastating civil war known as the Dance of the Dragons. The Green Council concealed Viserys' death just long enough to hastily crown Aegon II in the Dragon Pit. Upon hearing the news on Dragonstone, Rhaenyra, hardened by grief and a traumatic stillbirth triggered by the betrayal, arranged her own coronation, and the continent bled. The war was characterized by unspeakable, escalating tragedies. Aemond One-Eye drew first blood by chasing down and killing Rhaenyra's young son Lucerys over the storm-lashed skies of Shipbreaker Bay. In brutal, shadowy retaliation, Daemon orchestrated the infiltration of the Red Keep by 2 assassins known as Blood and Cheese, who forced Aegon's wife to choose which of her young sons would be beheaded before her eyes. As armies clashed in the Riverlands and the Reach, the skies became slaughterhouses. Rhaenyra's forces suffered the loss of the fierce Princess Rhaenys at the Battle of Rook's Rest, but crippled King Aegon II in the process, leaving him horribly burned and bedridden. In the west, Dalton Greyjoy, the fearsome Red Kraken, seized upon the chaos to launch massive reaving campaigns along the coastlines in the name of the Blacks, though truly only serving himself. Desperate for an advantage, the Blacks recruited baseborn dragon riders, the Dragonseeds, to claim masterless beasts on Dragonstone. This bolstered their ranks but led to a massive naval catastrophe in the Gullet, where Rhaenyra lost another son. Capitalizing on the Greens marching their strongest forces away from the capital, Rhaenyra and Daemon flew directly into King's Landing, capturing the city with minimal resistance. Queen Alicent was placed in chains, and King Aegon II vanished into hiding. However, Rhaenyra's rule quickly turned oppressive, driven by paranoia, betrayals, and a totally depleted treasury. Her heavy taxes and cruel executions of suspected traitors earned her the hatred of the small folk. The war culminated in a series of apocalyptic clashes. Prince Daemon and the Kinslayer Aemond engaged in a suicidal duel above the God's Eye, leaping from their falling dragons to drive a sword through Aemon's sapphire eye as they crashed into the boiling lake. In the south, 2 treacherous Dragonseeds betrayed Rhaenyra, incinerating the town of Tumbleton, before meeting their own messy ends in a surprise night attack by loyalist forces. At the Fish Feed and the Butcher's Ball, northern forces known as the Winter Wolves carved a bloody path through Green armies, leaving heaps of dead in their wake. Back in the capital, the breaking point arrived when a frenzied, fanatical mob, driven by a one-handed prophet, stormed the Dragon Pit. In a night of apocalyptic violence, the mob slaughtered the chained dragons, collapsing the Great Dome, while Rhaenyra's son Joffrey fell to his death trying to intervene. Fleeing the ruined city, Rhaenyra sought refuge back on Dragonstone, only to find her badly burned half-brother, Aegon the Sect, waiting for her, having secretly conquered the island. In front of her last surviving son, Rhaenyra was fed alive to Aegon's mangled dying dragon. Aegon the Sect reclaimed his throne, but his victory was entirely hollow. Broken in body and spirit, his reign was cut short when his own councillors, seeing the unstoppable approach of Rhaenyra's northern allies, poisoned his wine. The crown then fell to Rhaenyra's traumatized, gloomy son, who was crowned Aegon III and wed to Aegon II's daughter to officially unite the fractured bloodline. The war's immediate aftermath was dominated by the brief, ruthless justice of Cregan Stark, the Lord of Winterfell, who executed the late king's betrayers in an event known as the Hour of the Wolf before returning north. What followed was a complex and dreary regency. Aegon III, known forever as the Broken King, proved to be a pale, silent boy who shunned human connection, deeply scarred by the horrors he had witnessed. His regents spent years squabbling for power. The ambitious Unwin Peake attempted to force the young king to marry his own daughter after the tragic suicide of the king's first wife, but the plot was thwarted when a vibrant Velaryon girl captured the king's attention at a massive maiden's ball. The realm also suffered through a devastating plague called the Winter Fever that decimated the population and navigated the rise and catastrophic fall of the wealthy Rogar banking family from Lys, who arrived alongside the king's long-lost brother, Viserys. Meanwhile, Alyn Oakenfist, the young new master of the Velaryon fleet, won massive naval victories against the Free Cities and the Ironborn, securing the seas. A secret siege within the Red Keep tested the young monarch, who bravely defended his brother from treacherous Kingsguard knights acting on behalf of ambitious lords. It wasn't until Aegon III finally came of age that he abruptly dismissed his ambitious handlers, taking solitary control of a realm forever changed, a world where the magical might of the dragons was rapidly fading into memory.